Folks, your weekend edition is right here. Thanks for tuning in, joining the growing number of people in Canada and the US and in other places who are tuning into Stockwell Day-to-Day News, because it gives you we try and give you some insights behind the headlines, things that you're not going to get from mainstream media. And here on the weekend edition, we take a quick look at the last week, but mainly I want to give you an idea of what we think are some things coming up in the week ahead. And you can focus on these things, and you can lead the conversation among your friends in terms of what's happening. You be the prophet, you be the leader. So last week, we see some of the tapering off on the discussion. Their huge announcement near the start of the week was the pipeline deal going ahead, and this is going to be fantastic, and another pipeline is going to go, and the Prime Minister's agreed, and Premier of Alberta's agreed. But as I predicted, and I was sad to see the prediction come through, banks would come out saying there's not going to be a pipeline. No companies are going to be financed by banks as long as there's indecision from the First Nations crowd. It ain't going to happen. And in spite of that, when we saw a remarkable announcement by the Métis Association of Alberta, when we see those Indigenous groups saying they are big supporters, they can make it happen, they can help, it's going to help the environment, and they give all the reasons that they want to see First Nations prosper, that story got very little coverage. You need to keep in mind mainstream media goes along with the cultural Marxist view coming out of the UN and coming out of global reporting. The culturally Marxist view from left-leaning politicians and from academics is they don't like growth. They think growth of any kind is bad, population growth is bad, economic growth is bad, and anything that is speaking of the possibility of positive economic growth, they really don't want to talk about. And that's why you don't see stories. And I've asked CBC and other corporations for a long time, please do more stories on all of the very effective First Nations plans and the First Nations chiefs who run very business-like, very prosperous operations. Mainstream media does not like to cover those stories. It's always the story of First Nation as victim, Indians as victim, Indians in recovery. That's all they want, or trying to get in recovery. That's all they want to talk about. They stay away from stories where First Nations people have been huge successes and prosper their people. So that story continues to kind of wind down because it looks like there's going to be no pickup in terms of financing on the pipeline groups because nobody is giving the other alternative and the other narrative in terms of positive First Nations reaction. John Rustad was the leader of the BC Conservatives Party, and he got punted out after just about 2 years ago, the most remarkable turnaround in political history in terms of political party. And whoever they pick for the new leader, look, I'm saying this. You have got to talk about the economy. You've got to talk about whether this is provincial or civic or national. Talk about how left-leaning economics and more government spending always hurts the economy, always hurts jobs, always makes things more unaffordable. You've got to be talking about the economy, and you've got to be talking, put this clear, the drug epidemic, the homelessness on the streets. You've got to say that you are opposed to those policies which are straight out of San Francisco, and they landed on the streets of Vancouver 3 decades ago, and British Columbia and most of its cities are drowning in the problems created by giving free drugs and free accommodation with no accountability. Yes, you've got to deal with the mental health issues, but the time and era, you've got to speak up, Conservatives, about this. You're going to go after it. Media will go berserk because they don't like that message. They want a message of government accountability. So you've got to focus. Economy, the drug problem, how that's going to be turned around. The Premier of Alberta has given a little sliver of light there with looking at legislation of mandatory incarceration for the most severe, violent-prone drug addicts, to give them an opportunity, hopefully at least to dry out for a bit and get some mental health care. Those are the type of things, increase responsibility. And then the other thing, I'm sorry, Conservatives, but you are going to have to be more clear on the gender policy, and you don't have to sound mean, you don't have to be going after everybody. You can make the case that adults have the opportunity and they have the right to transform themselves any way they want, but kids need to be predicted, And the policy, again, going back to Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, talking about no kids are going to be allowed to get the puberty-blocking drugs, which are increasingly being found around the world to be so devastating and dangerous. And kids are not going to be allowed to get the so-called transition surgery, where their genitals basically are mutilated and removed. Adults can make those choices, kids cannot. So John Rustad and the Conservatives, they kind of mentioned that a little bit, but they run in terror and run in fear when media start to say that this is terrible policy and you hate people and you don't like other types of people. That's all a pile of baloney. We respect the rights of all people, but we will protect kids from this, and women's private spaces. We're talking about gymnasia. We're talking about locker rooms, yes, shower rooms. You've got to be clear that there will be no transgendered individuals allowed in those spaces. And again, politicians are terrified, and you conservative politicians, you leaders, you're listening too much to that tiny little group that surrounds you, that has grown up in the Capitol and grown up with cultural Marxism, and they're telling you, whispering in your ear, no, don't raise this stuff. The media is not going to like it. You're right, the media is not going to like it, but people are going to hear you. You will get support. If you don't say things at least clearly on those three items that I just mentioned, along with others, of course, you're not going to beat the socialists or the liberals, because they have the strong backing of mainstream media. So there you go, a little hint as the BC Conservatives find and search for a new leader. And the other thing, we're looking back on the week behind, and I said this was going to happen. There's been this incident, and Canadian media has been picking it up, and CBC has been picking it up. The taxpayer-funded organizations that call themselves media have been picking this up. And it's this tragic case of the drug boat that was torpedoed coming out of Venezuela, and apparently there were 2 survivors, and then they got evaporated also. It was being reported at the start of the week that it was the Minister, or the Secretary of War, as they call him, Pete Hegseth, gave an order to kill the 2 survivors who were apparently clinging to the boat. And now even the New York Times has said, no, that wasn't true. He didn't give that order. Anyway, there's just unbelievable. It's been nuclear level reporting on how the White House is responsible for these 2 guys getting hit while they were surviving. Reports are emerging, of course, that they were trying to get the boat back in shape and get the drugs and get out of there. But here's the difference. This is what I say in terms of how media treats stories differently. In the Obama years, and this can be researched, I did the research, I got the actual numbers, these are government numbers. During the Obama years in the US, President Obama personally ordered 541 drone attacks in countries on terrorists, and I'm not going yes or no on the policy. I'm just telling you on how things don't get reported, or they do get reported. 541 drone attacks, and not just in one country, in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in Yemen, in Somalia, and he ordered those, and he called those double tap drone attacks. So if that hut they thought there were terrorists in got blown up, and you saw some survivors in the hut, you give it a double tap. You hit it again. And with that double tap policy in countries that were not even outwardly anyway attacking the U.S., look, we can debate the policy. Almost zero criticism on President Obama. He actually kept the death lists. He asked for those, which was the responsible thing to do. Over 3,800 people killed by Obama's drone attacks, double tap drone attacks, and the order was take no prisoners. When you hit, you kill them all. If there's some crawling out of the wreckage, you kill them. Zero. I'm saying zero media attention on that. In President Clinton's years, when the whole Bosnia conflict was going on, he personally ordered 3,515 bombing attacks. These aren't drones, these are bombs dropped. Now, we can argue that's another debate, but 3,015, and the same thing, no survivors, attack, the death toll, it's hard to estimate because there's in the 2 years, in the overall conflict, there was about 110,000 deaths, which was horrific in a short period of time. Thousands and thousands of those were from President Clinton's 3,515 bomb attacks, again, in a country that was not even attacking the United States. And the UN supported him, and very little media criticism. So just pointing out the differences there, it's kind of hilarious, except we're talking about daily stuff. It's been nonstop, 24/7 criticism that the two other drug guys got nuked. And this was with vessels that are and were attacking the United States in a different way with the drugs that killed. Overdose drug deaths in the U.S. in the last year, over 100,000 more people that were killed than in Vietnam. And you decide whether the balance of media reporting is fair or not. I've said before, if you are only listening to CNN, if you are only listening to CBC and similar media companies, you are being intellectually and probably emotionally impaired. You've got to spread out your news gathering, folks. One of those places to get the news would be right here. I hope I'm glad to see you're taking advantage of that. What you're going to continue to see in the week ahead, continued focus on affordability and inflation, but unfortunately it's going to be all on affordability, not so much inflation. And this is what is going to be the biggest threat to the White House and to Republicans in the midterm elections coming up in 2026. It's affordability. And people, you can't deny, you're going to the grocery store and you're paying more for eggs and you're paying more for bread and you're paying more for meat. The single greatest factor, this is in Canada and the US, that affects inflation, which is the growing cost, is not just costs going up, but government caused price rises, is government spending, and they're spending with money they don't have, so they have to borrow it. Debt-based government spending is the single biggest reason your groceries are going up, because as government creates money and dumps it into the economy, that's inflation, and your dollar today will buy less. It will be worth less at the grocery store tomorrow. To give you an idea, since the Liberals were elected in Canada in 2015, the inflation rate, accumulated inflation rate, is 27.8%. That's just, there are other things that cause prices to rise, but the single greatest reason and cause in price rises, almost 30% at the grocery store and other places, is government spending without an increase in business activity and with more jobs in the private sector. And in the U.S., this last year, the rate of inflation has only been 3%, but that's added on to the Biden years, in almost 4 years, in the U.S., 21% inflation increase. So you take the 21% under Biden, add 3% under Trump, that's a 24% inflation risk. Yes, that affects you at the grocery store. That affects you when you are buying stuff. And it's the government of the day, this is just the sad reality of politics, it's the government of the day that will pay the price for affordability, even if it was the previous government that caused it. So what you need to remember, and what conservative parties need to remind people, folks, every time you see a politician out there with a promise of new spending on something, every single announcement on new government spending, it's based on debt. It's not based on more jobs and more people working. I want you to picture the price of your eggs going up. You see Prime Minister Carney saying the government invested, and he never says the word spent. He never says the word government spent. He says the government invested, and he'll talk about something, even investing so-called in business. When government invests in business, it generally makes that business less productive. So please, and opposition parties, if you are conservative leaning, you've got to focus on this. Remind people every time they hear an announcement from a politician about more spending, the price of their groceries is going up. Please keep that in mind. One of the biggest attacks, too, which is ironic in terms of going after affordability, left-leaning governments. So what do? Left-leaning governments, they create the inflation and then they attack business. They say we're going to bring in price controls. We're going to control the grocery industry. We're going to do all these things. Government creates the problem and then blames private citizens for it. You're going to see more of that coming up in the week ahead on those particular issues on affordability. Also, watch this week coming up, China and U.S. relations, I believe, are going to continue not to improve. They're going to continue to be strained. China's economy is in big trouble right now. And you're going to see, and then adding to the strain, an interesting thing that's happening in Europe and Canada is these countries, Canada and European countries, think the best way to push back on the Americans is to draw closer to China. So next week, keep an eye on President Macron from France. He's going to be visiting China, and it's promoting this link. It's the great irony that you see these countries, left-leaning economies like Canada's and like European countries, they destroy their own economies, and then what do? They draw closer to the strongest communist country in the world with the worst human rights record, and they push away from the United States. Very interesting. You're going to see that continue, so watch for that visit coming up this week. The Economist magazine now says that 1/3 of teenagers, 1/3 of all teenagers, their closest relationship now is with the AI character that they devise and that they invent and talk to by the hour in their rooms. And of course, guys will have female characters often, unless they're gay, and then they'll have a guy character, and girls will have a boyfriend or another girlfriend. But more and more, a third, I want you to think about that. That's millions of teens saying their best and most important relationship is with a fake creation, their AI character. Parents, tune into this. There's ways to address it. We'll talk about that in the coming days. The also reported is, and I've touched on this, watch for more reports coming up this week, as young as 2-year-olds completely addicted and obsessed with AI created creatures, the little animals that talk to them. They can tell the animals what to do. They're drawing closer to them, a huge obsession. And more and more reports are coming. It's called brain rot, but the effect to be able to intellectually use your intellect to think about things, debate things, and reason is depleting rapidly. The other thing it's doing with the AI created with so many more teens with AI characters, they're creating characters that agree with them, that are comforting to them, that say wonderful and beautiful things to them, and in many cases say sexual things to them. So increasingly, you've got a teen population that is geared to not hearing anything opposed to what they want. So the first time they confront an adult who's got a different point of view, or the adult tells them what to do, they actually break down. Intellectually, they can't function. They will retreat to their room. They will retreat to their AI character and say, my parents, my mommy, and my daddy are being mean. They're saying meaningful things to me like clean up your room, and or teachers who are presenting a different point of view. It's a serious business, folks. What they're seeing also with this, there's already the analysis is going on at Christmas time with what kids want for Christmas, and increasingly, Gen Alpha, the young kids, they don't want toys. They want game cards, or they want you to give them money of in-game currency. You know, if you've seen your kids playing these games, you get tokens as you win, or as you are about to win, you have to pay more, and they get a credit card, and you actually have to buy the tokens online. Hugely addictive. Kids are asking more and more for these. My wife and I just found this out recently. We were donating to a Christmas program for low-income families and low-income kids, and these families they get the list and they give them to the church, and the church reaches out and people go shopping for the gifts. Increasingly, the teens want game cards. They want tokens. They want to become more and more obsessed on their machines. Is there any positive on this? Can we end on a positive note? Well, there's an app that's getting huge response, and it's called Girls Room. Ask your daughters if they've heard of it, Girls Room. There was one called Boys Room. Girls Room, what it does, it shows the girls how to make their own room a very personalized space with all the beautiful and wonderful things to adorn their room with, and how to create just a magical room in their own room. Now, this is going to, of course, cause for increased drawing away from parents, even from friends, and go in there and chat. So the overall direction I don't think is positive, but one of the things that's pretty humorous about the girls' rooms is when they're talking to the AI, the AI is telling, well, you put your room in order this way, do this. It's a very subtle way. The kids, especially girls, are listening to AI who's saying, get some order in your room, but they won't listen to the parents who are saying, tidy their room. But parents, maybe one good byproduct of all of this obsession is your daughters and maybe your sons might be having tidier rooms after all. Enjoy your weekend as you think about these things. We'll see you on Monday. Thanks for tuning in.